Joining me now is Sky News US contributor Michael Ware. Michael, great to see you. Let's look at the evidence that Israel has provided, and I don't exactly know what I'm looking at, but first there was that audio evidence, then there are photos. Let's go through these photos. There are a series of them. There are 3 photos. The first one shows, I assume, what Gaza and this area looked like before the blast, or this is just after. What are we looking at here?
Well, what the Israelis are showing in that first photograph is where they believe that the 2 cameras filmed the explosion that hit the hospital. And the Israeli argument there is, from where the images were taken, it was evident that the missiles had been coming from, or the rockets had been coming from inside Gaza. That's what they claim those images show. There's 2 other pieces of more compelling evidence. Yes, that shows all the misfires of all the Palestinian rockets that have occurred just during this war. That is not uncommon. We see that time and time again. So that's what the Israeli Defense Force is showing us with that map. 450 misfires. They're showing us the angle from which the launch site sent the trajectory of those rockets, including the one that the Israelis claim misfired. Now, don't forget, the Israeli Iron Dome system relies heavily on a very complex, very sophisticated radar system. So as soon as these rockets launch and leave the ground, the Israelis are watching them. And that's what the Israeli Defense Force is claiming they're showing us here. This is where that rocket and multiple others came from. I think, however, 2 most compelling pieces of evidence that we've seen so far from the Israelis is, one is that signal intercept that you played. That has a ring of legitimacy about it. And it's 2 members of Hamas, don't forget, 2 members of Hamas talking about this rocket that hit the hospital and blaming it on Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a much more hardline, much more militant group than even Hamas. And you hear that fighter, as you played, speaking to what's clearly a commander, saying the shrapnel is out. It's not Israeli. The other piece of fairly compelling evidence or of material that's been provided by the Israelis is the images of the kind of cratering that we see at the hospital site. And when you compare the cratering that we see at the hospital to the kind of crater that an Israeli missile leaves and the kind of damage that an Israeli air-to-ground missile leaves, don't even compare. I mean, the crater that we see near the hospital is about 7 meters. An Israeli missile will be at least 19 meters, and it would have leveled half the buildings around it.
Okay, that is really compelling, the way you put that, Michael Ware. A few things that stand out to me. I think you would have heard Mustafa there, Baghouti from Ramallah, saying there needs to be an international inspector here, someone that both sides trust and can make a impassioned, I should say, dispassionate assessment of what's going on here. I think that would seem like a reasonable request. The few questions I have is that if Hamas is claiming there are 471 plus people that have died in that particular hospital blast, where are the bodies? I don't think we've seen, that's quite a grim request to make, but I don't think we've seen the aftermath that would actually present that as true. And you talk about the crater. Is there a chance that we are just not being shown some other areas around the blast site?
Look, they're great questions because any and all of that is possible. One thing you've got to remember is that ancient adage that the first casualty of war is truth. And in every war, everyone lies. Their governments, our governments, the insurgents, the militants, our militaries, everybody lies. And yes, the Israeli Defense Force likes to spin its story, but obviously so does Hamas. And I will tell you, Hamas has already won the information war on this strike. It doesn't matter to an extent who fired that rocket or whether it was an Israeli missile, because they got their story out almost immediately. And that story was picked up on the Arab Street throughout the Middle East, and that's now the story that people in the region believe. And you're not going to shake them from that belief. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Force did what any professional military does. It did an after-action report. It would have gone through things forensically, and then it released its statement. I mean, I've seen this in Afghanistan and Iraq over and over and over. The Taliban, the insurgents, the Islamic State, there's an incident, they immediately put out their story. And then within, say, the US military, you know, the information has to pass up a chain, and then it has to come back down the chain before there's approval for it to be released. By then, the defining narrative is the first one that's out there. And that's why I say Hamas has already won the information war on this unfortunate strike.
Yeah, and the timing meant that Joe Biden didn't meet with Arab leaders because Arab leaders cancelled that summit. So certainly a massive setback, and we'll see where that ends up. Michael Ware, always a pleasure to talk to you though.
Thank you.